There was something I resisted for many years. Something I did not want to believe, did not want to live through, and certainly did not want to accept. It was this: not everything in life can be changed. Some things cannot be fixed, cannot be undone, cannot be brought back to the way they were before. Some things can only be accepted. That sounds simple when you hear it, almost obvious. But when life places a real loss in your hands, when a wrong decision has already been made, when something important is gone, and no amount of regret can reverse it, acceptance does not feel simple at all. It feels impossible, because a part of you keeps believing that if you think hard enough, regret deeply enough, or punish yourself long enough, you might somehow change what has already happened. I know this, because I lived that way. For a long time, I was not someone who accepted easily. I thought that was one of my strengths. If something broke, I wanted to repair it. If something was lost, I wanted to recover it. If I failed, I wanted to rise quickly and prove that nothing had really ended. I believed persistence could solve almost anything. And in some parts of life, that belief helped me. It gave me energy. It kept me going. It allowed me to stand again after smaller falls. So I began to think that refusing to give up was always the right way. But then life brought me into a kind of pain that could not be negotiated with. A painful loss. A decision that had already been made. A consequence that had already unfolded. There was no way to rewind time. No way to return to the moment before. No way to unmake what had already become real. And yet, inside my mind, I kept trying. That was the exhausting part. The event itself had ended. But in me, it continued. Every morning, before I even fully opened my eyes, the old story was already there, waiting, not as memory alone, but as a question. What if I had done it differently? What if I had seen the signs sooner? What if I had been more careful? What if I had paused one more day? What if I had not trusted so quickly? What if I had chosen another path? Those questions did not visit me once and leave. They built a home in my mind. They came with me through breakfast, through work, through conversations, through evenings, through the moments when the world around me looked normal. People still talked, still laughed, still made plans for tomorrow. But part of me was trapped somewhere else, trapped in a version of the past that no longer existed, but that I kept replaying, as if replaying it might somehow rescue me. There were nights when I lay awake in the dark, going over every detail, every decision, every warning sign, every turning point, every tiny moment, I believed could have changed everything. If only I had acted differently. I thought if I examined it enough, I would find the answer. That would finally give me peace. But the opposite happened. The more I analyzed, the more tangled I became. The more I tried to mentally rebuild the past, the more I suffered in the present, because I was doing something deeply human, but deeply painful. I was fighting with reality. I was refusing to let what had already happened be true. And that refusal was costing me more than the original loss. This is something I did not understand at first. I thought the pain was coming only from what I had lost. But eventually, in a very quiet moment, I saw that there were two layers of pain. The first pain was the event itself, the loss, the mistake, the consequence. That pain was real, and it mattered. But the second pain was the one I kept creating. It came from arguing with what was. It came from wanting reality to be different from what it had become. It came from saying, again and again, this should not have happened. That sentence looks harmless, but when repeated long enough, it becomes a prison. Because reality does not answer to our resistance. It does not soften because we reject it. It simply remains what it is. And in one quiet season of my life, when I was tired of carrying all that inner conflict, I began to realize something that hurt to admit. I was trying to change something that could not be changed. The past had already happened. It was over. It was done. It had become part of my story. Whether I liked it or not, there was no bargain left to make. No hidden door back. No version of enough regret that would reopen time for me. And yet I kept pulling on it inside my mind, as if I could drag it back and rearrange it. That realization brought both pain and clarity. Pain, because I had to face how powerless I truly was before what had already happened. Clarity, because I could finally see why I had been so exhausted. I was spending the energy of my present life trying to rewrite a closed chapter. That chapter had ended, but I would not let it end in me. Then one day, during a satsang, I heard a sentence that reached me more deeply than many long explanations ever had. You are not only hurting because of what happened. You are hurting because you do not accept that it happened. I remember sitting with those words in complete silence, because they were true, painful, but true. I had heard ideas like that before. In books, in talks, in quiet teachings about surrender and peace. But that day, it was no longer a beautiful idea. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw my own struggle clearly. I was not only grieving the loss, I was resisting it. I was asking life to return to me, a version of the past that no longer existed. I was trying to make reality obey my regret. And of course, that was never going to happen. That was the beginning of acceptance. Not perfect acceptance. Not instant acceptance. Just the beginning. And I want to say this clearly. Acceptance is not a switch. You do not hear one sentence and become peaceful forever. Acceptance, for me, was a practice. A slow one. An uneven one. Some days, I felt more open. Other days, one small memory would bring back the old ache, the old resistance, the old wish that things had gone differently. But something had changed. I stopped treating those feelings as proof that I was failing. Instead, I began to meet them differently. Whenever the old thoughts came, the thoughts that began with, if only, or, it should have been different, I started saying something simple to myself. This happened. That was all. Not a speech. Not an argument. Not a justification. Just a simple return to truth. This happened. At first, those words felt almost cold. Too plain. For something that carried so much pain. But over time, I understood their power. Because they were not denying the hurt. They were ending the inner argument. They were bringing me back from imagination to reality. This happened. It should not have happened? Maybe. But it did. I wish it had gone differently. Of course. But it did not. It was in that honesty that something inside me began to relax. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But enough for me to breathe again. And this is where many people misunderstand acceptance. They think acceptance means approval. They think it means saying, "What happened was good," or "I am fine with it," or "It does not matter." That is not what I mean. Acceptance does not mean liking what happened. It does not mean calling pain beautiful before it has finished hurting. And it does not mean becoming passive or weak. Acceptance means stopping the war against facts. It means ending the exhausting effort to deny what is already true. It means saying, "I do not like this. I wish it were different." But it is here. And I will not destroy myself fighting what has already happened. That is very different. In fact, I think acceptance takes more strength than resistance, because resistance often feels active, proud, even righteous. Acceptance feels quieter. It asks you to stop performing control where no control remains. It asks you to let reality be reality. And for a mind used to fixing, controlling, correcting, and pushing forward, that is not easy. But when I stopped fighting, something unexpected happened. I became lighter. Not because the loss disappeared. Not because the consequences changed. They did not. But the event no longer occupied all the rooms of my mind. There was space again. Space for stillness. Space for breath. Space for lessons that had been buried under too much emotional noise. I could finally begin asking different questions. Not, why did this happen to me? Not, how do I undo it? Not, how do I prove this should not have happened? But, what is life asking me to learn from this now? How do I live honestly after this? What remains possible if I stop looking backward every minute? Those questions belong to the present, and because of that, they could actually help me. Acceptance gave me back the present. That may be the deepest gift of it. Because when you are trapped in resistance, you do not only lose peace, you lose access to the life that is still here. You lose mornings that could have been gentle, conversations you could have truly been present for, small beauty you might have noticed, the future that is quietly waiting for your participation. You become faithful to a wound instead of faithful to life itself. I did that for too long, and I understand why. There is something seductive about staying in the old story. It feels like loyalty, like seriousness, like refusing to be careless with what happened. But eventually, you have to ask, is this loyalty to the truth? Or attachment to suffering? That was an important question for me, because I realized I was not honoring the loss anymore. I was feeding it. I was giving it too much authority over the life that remained. Once I saw that, acceptance stopped feeling like surrender to defeat. It began to feel like the first act of freedom. I could let the past be part of my story without letting it become my entire identity. I could grieve it, learn from it, carry its wisdom, and still step forward. That matters. It matters because acceptance is not the end of growth. It is the beginning of real growth. Only when you stop denying what happened can you truly learn from it. Only when you stop resisting the truth can you use your energy for something alive. And slowly, I also learned that acceptance is not only about events. It is also about yourself. About accepting that you were capable of error. That you were not fully aware then. That you were human. For a long time, I could not accept that part either. I wanted to believe I should have been wiser, smarter, stronger, more careful. But the truth is, I was who I was then. And part of acceptance was allowing that to be true, without turning it into hatred. I could say, yes, I made that choice. Yes, it hurt. Yes, I wish I had known better. And yes, that was still me. Not a monster. Not a hopeless person. Just a human being who had not yet learned what pain would later teach. That softened me. And when softness entered, clarity followed. I became less interested in punishing myself and more interested in living differently. I became less obsessed with old versions of the story and more available for the life in front of me. And that is what acceptance has become for me now. Not a dramatic spiritual state. Not a permanent feeling of peace. Just a quiet willingness to stop arguing with what is already true. Some days, that willingness is strong. Other days, I have to return to it again and again. But even that returning is part of the path. So if there is something in your life that you keep replaying, something you keep resisting, something you wish had gone another way, I want to offer you something simple. You do not have to approve of it. You do not have to call it good. You do not have to be ready to smile about it. But maybe, gently, you can stop asking reality to become different from what it is. Maybe you can say, this happened. It hurt. I did not want it. But it is real. And I am still here. That may not feel like a miracle, but it is the doorway through which peace enters. Because acceptance does not erase the wound. It simply stops making the wound your whole world. And maybe that is enough for now. Maybe healing does not begin when life becomes easy. Maybe it begins when you stop fighting what cannot be undone and turn very gently toward the life that is still asking to be lived. If this met a quiet place inside you, stay here with me on Calm Within.